Off to the races. Off to the races. What is going on, man?
Hi, yeah, thank you for coming on. It's really great to finally get you on. It's definitely something that I wanted to do for the channel for a while. So for you guys watching right now, if you're not familiar, this is Saint from Fables Hunter. Do
Hello.
you want to introduce yourself a little bit and kind of what you do?
Well, I hunt fableds. I've been known to buy a whole bunch of Flesh and Blood boxes. Prior to that, I bought a whole bunch of Magic the Gathering boxes and collections, but I don't do as much of that now. These days, I'm into the good old FAB and just trying to spread good vibes across the community. And I think we met via Messenger, Facebook Messenger. Hit me up. It's actually the 4th of July today, so I happen to be off all day celebrating the independence of this great nation. Or what was it? I think John Oliver was kidding. In Europe, they call it Colonial Aggression Day, right? Something like that.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
yeah, that's basically it. And you're actually at work right now, right? We're really hustling to make this
Yeah, I'm on
happen.
a break. Yeah, I'm on a break at the moment. So it's definitely one of those. I wanted to make this happen. Obviously, I know you're very busy with your schedule, so trying to fit this in
Yeah, we both
was
accommodated.
definitely
We made
it's
time for each other,
yeah,
and this is
exactly.
important to you. It's I made it a priority, and here we are.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So in terms of your move to more towards flesh and blood, obviously that's something over the last couple of years. Flesh and blood is growing. Flesh and blood is a card game that myself I've moved more into away from Pokemon, whereas kind of a similar transition, I guess, for you with Magic the Gathering to Flesh and Blood. What was it when you first saw Fab that kind of lured you into it?
Lured me into it. Well, I have to say it was a couple of high-end collector friends that they were really getting into it. It was firstly James Curry, AAA, also known as Andrew Glagowski, as well as even Chris Sayers was doing the opening way back in the day when Crucible First Edition was all the rage. I saw them get into it. They're like, you really, as much volume as you do as you collect in Magic the Gathering, you really got to understand this game. You really just play one game. Just play this game one time. And they just kept harping on. It was 30, 45, 60 days, and everything was booming in Magic the Gathering at the time. Well, everything was booming. Crypto was booming. MTG was
Yeah.
booming. Pokemon was booming. Sports cards were booming. And I was like, I don't know. But then one day I sat down. Finally, it was AAA that convinced me to play a game of, it was Dorinthia versus Dash in Classic Constructed. And I played Dorinthia, and I was sold off of one game. I think AAA might have let me win because it was my first game or something like that, and he just lured me in, and I've never looked back. I made a quite notorious purchase of 100 cases of Welcome to Wraith from Channel Fireball. Rudy made a video, and after that, it was all history.
Yeah, there definitely seemed to be that sort of moment, I guess. Crucible of War is a moment that a lot of people mention. That was when I got in as well. I'd seen Team Covenant post about it. I remember I sat there and I think I watched about 7 hours of Flesh and Blood openings, just straight, sort of trying to take in what I was kind of seeing here. It was very much Magic the Gathering was something that I've dabbled in over the years, but it was never the card game from my childhood like Pokemon was and Yu-Gi-Oh. And Flesh and Blood was definitely the first card game as an adult that I got into, because the rest of them were just card games that I got into as a child and sort of just continuously collected and played. But Flesh and Blood definitely was there was definitely something different about it, whether it was the lore, the cards, the gameplay, or just the way that James White had this vision for this card game. And I think that community feel definitely is something that's resonated with myself. I know that I wouldn't have got into it if I hadn't joined communities on Discord and Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that compared to a lot of card games, there seems to be so much more of a community feel. Um, and I think that's one of the reasons why Flesh and Blood has done so well over these last couple of years.
Well, it's done rather well. I think it could still do better. There are some places where they could improve, but they're constantly improving right now. For example, we just went through spoiler season, and Alex, who's the head of the content creation outreach team, he just wrote everybody an email, presumably because I received one, so I'm guessing the whole team, all contributing content creators received one, explaining about why things were on such short notice, and some people didn't get their actual boxes before the spoiler date. He just wanted to, keep a really tight window of time frame so that not too many cards were spoiled, and he's been rather successful. He's kept it pretty close, and it was after most of the spoilers actually came out that Fabled actually was spoiled, and as of this morning, the Fabled is now public and open information. So they're keeping their cards close to the vest, which
Yeah,
is great. Which is great. Yeah.
yeah. I think that that was definitely something I noticed about the spoiler season. Was it felt different than past ones? I know there's been some controversies with past spoiler seasons where certain stores like Channel Fireball have leaked stuff early, which caused a lot of. I think it was Everfest that seemed to cause a lot of reaction from people, which is completely understandable. I think this spoiler season, the way Flesh and Blood do it, is so unique compared to other card games. Getting so many content creators involved in it, in the whole process, and giving them, the opportunity to spoil something for a card game that they're making content for and they love, which is it's one of those little finer touches for me that is the reason why I feel like Flesh and Blood is doing. Obviously, there's improvements to be made. Everyone, I think, in the creator kind of world has made content about kind of what things that LSS and Flesh and Blood can improve on.
Yep.
But I think they seem to be doing a very good job at listening to what people want, and the feedback seems to be very receptive from them, which is something that I don't see Pokemon or Wizard of the Coast definitely don't do that.
Oh, hell yeah.
Um,
You're right about that.
yeah,
Definitely not from WotC. Pokemon, I don't follow close enough. I've only seen a couple of tournament videos, but I mean, Pokemon, I think the IP sells itself because as long as you've got a
yeah,
Pikachu and, Charmander and, whoever else, Venusaur out there, it's gonna sell to kids. But I would say that Flesh and Blood holds itself to a much, much higher bar because they are always engaging the community. They're always challenging the status quo. They're always innovating. And this current set is definitely, doing that. It's following suit and they're making it a big deal. It's a big splash. It's the 10th set ever. So 10 is monumental psychologically to the human brain, right? And even despite all that, despite it being the greatest spoiler season, I would say, of any spoiler season that I've seen or been a part of, um, even the creator James White, even today, this morning, he just dropped a little tidbit. I don't know. I mean, you've been working today, Jamie. So have you heard of that little Easter egg that he dropped?
I haven't. No,
No, no, you haven't. Okay. So just this
I'm
morning,
intrigued.
he updated the collector center and he announced that though Dust Till Dawn, this set is the 10th printing and it's printed, I think he printed it in April or June or something like that. Although it's printed, it's officially OOP or out of print. And that announcement just happened today.
Okay.
So whatever is
Yeah,
printed right now, it's printed and that's it. And one would think that's reasonable because they had printed 20 limited edition cards worldwide, right? The 10 prisms and the 10
yeah,
chains
it's
with
very
the
nice.
custom arts. And as of now, it's officially out of print. So they've never done that before. I don't think even today, I don't think Uprising is officially out of print yet. Last I checked, nor has
Not yet. No.
Dynasty or Outsiders been out of print. But Dusk Till Dawn, they made it special and it's out of print. And it was an amazing spoiler season. And, everything is just operating like a well-oiled machine as they wanted it. They've had to deal with so many logistics issues and in prior years, not now anymore. COVID's no longer an excuse, but Dustblade and Tales of Aria back then during the New Zealand lockdowns it was an excuse. But now you're seeing Legend Story Studios function as a truly well organized business on every single level.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's definitely apparent. It makes sense to announce it out of print because obviously you got those serialized cards. That be interesting to see kind of how the community takes that. I
Mm-hmm.
think it'll probably be taken as as a good sign. I think something that I've enjoyed about Flesh and Blood, and I know has been a bit of a controversy in the past, especially when Monarch print numbers were announced. I know that that is something that I really enjoy compared to other card games. That transparency from LSS to right, here's the amount that is printed. This is it. It's in print or it's out of print. And I think these things for such a young company, I mean, 4 years old now, is something that so many card games, so many companies haven't learned in 10, 15, 20, 25 years.
Yeah, 30
And I think,
years. 30 years in terms of WotC.
yeah,
Absolutely correct.
30, yeah, 30 years for sure. And I think, it's going to be exciting to see what happens over the next couple of years with Flesh and Blood because I remember posting in on my socials for so many years. 2020, I uploaded my first video and it was a WCR Unlimited box opening. I did it in two parts. It was an awful camera work. It was
Oh,
abysmal,
really?
but it was my first experience, and I wanted to document it live by recording the video. And I've looked back at that video now and sort of, I enjoy it because I was, the excitement back then is still the excitement that I have now. And I know that I've tried pushing Flesh and Blood for other people that I know that play and collect other card games. Some people, it's worse. They picked up some Flesh and Blood, and for the most part, they all appreciate the card game because I have pretty much just rammed it down their throat for the last 3 years.
Okay.
But it's yeah, I think it's exciting to see that a lot of people doubted that it would make it out of 2021. Obviously, you had a lot of indie TCGs, and I think some people sort of put it in the same category as these Kickstarter TCGs as well, because they didn't really understand, what LSS was, what the vision was, the lore, the card, how much time has been put into creating this card game, well before we even got the release in 2019.
Oh, absolutely, yes. James has always said that he spent roughly 7 years ideating the game. He was probably working another business or even spending his last days at Hasbro, and he's like, man, this is definitely not going as planned with the world of Magic the Gathering and Dominia. I could dream up a better world, dream up a world of Wraith and Aria and the Monastery and Savage Lands and whatnot. And he did. He probably did actually start in 2012, but you saw just the beginning of his world in 2019. And earlier you brought up something rather interesting about just trying to jam this down people's throats and being early, jamming, forcing Flesh and Blood down people's throats. But your side, they were receptive. My side, I don't think they were as receptive. But what was your experience when you had started being a fab evangelist in 2020 versus now?
Yeah, I definitely would say that. I mean, I've got quite a really good close knit group of friends that are in my group chat. We go to card events together, and everyone collects different card games. But our common card games is Pokemon. But there's a lot. Everyone's very open minded. They're very, they're willing to learn and sort of listen and get involved in new card games. But I would definitely say the wider sort of spectrum of it is I had a lot of people, telling me that Flesh and Blood was a Magic rip-off, and I think a lot of this was from the Magic Gathering community. I found
Oh, of course.
they were, I know a lot moved from Magic to Fab, but I think the people that are probably some people may be too in deep with with Magic the Gathering, or they're not willing to kind of try a different card game. They definitely were. I've had comments on my videos. I had comments on Discord and the Facebook groups, and even at card stores where I had asked if they'd stocked Flesh and Blood and they hadn't. And I had staff sort of laugh at me and say that they're not stocking a card game that they're not going to make money on.
Yeah.
So yeah, my inner circle was great about it, but I can definitely
Why,
see
why
that.
were they stocking Magic the Gathering for the past 5 years to a decade if they didn't want to stock card games that they couldn't make money on? I mean, Baldur's Gate was a
Yeah.
thing, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's definitely put your head down in the sand and kind of hope it blows over. But for sure with Magic, it definitely hasn't done that. I know the Lord of the Rings set is. I mean, I love Lord of the Rings, so I've opened some myself. But that's more because it's Lord of the Rings than it's a Magic product. But yeah, it's yeah, I definitely say a lot of people, if you asked that been in Flesh and Blood the last couple of years, they'd probably say a similar story of like people just doubted. Um, but I don't think with anything really, unless you understand the bigger picture, um, it's probably quite hard for people to understand your passion for it.
Absolutely. Or believe that you can actually be passionate about it because they're on the outside looking in. A lot of the saltiest part of the TCG community, I believe, are Magic the Gathering loyalists. And some of them are entrenched, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 30 years. And they're like, Magic the Gathering is the best and there can only be MTG. And my message from day one was like, first off, there can't only be MTG. Let's look outside, you know? People believe in different things around the world, right? And you don't need to treat Magic the Gathering as the one religion, right? And Mark Rosewater as your one true god. He failed everybody with Magic 30, by the way. I just have to, insert that in. And with all this universes beyond, starting from things like the Walking Dead crossover to Street Fighter, My Little Pony, all that stuff. It's just absolutely ludicrous. Magic isn't really magic anymore. And although Lord of the Rings, I love Lord of the Rings. I love all of Tolkien's work. I think, The Hobbit was three movies that should have been one. But other than that, watched everything that Peter Jackson made. But what Lord of the Rings is currently doing to magic is it's warping magic, and this cash grab and this marketing grab, it's turning into magic's last gasp, I think. And like when you go from cards that are about fantasy, high fantasy, you know, futuristic fiction, even later on in some sets, or a little bit of that steampunk element when everything is paper. Then you introduce foils that are just very rare with like seventh edition and the Urza block. I think it was Urza's Legacy, Urza's Destiny, and then Mercadian Masks, and then moving onward. Um, then things were going well for a while, but then they needed to iterate, and soon enough there were different borders like modern frame borders. Then there was like box topper full art cards, and then soon after it was all these cards were in like 17 different foil presentations, and now it's serialized cards. But once you go to serialized cards that they did last year with Brothers War and now with Lord of the Rings, the first 101, there really isn't any going back. You can't, put the genie back in the bottle. And I
Yeah.
think it's just, they say it's like the signs of a mature product that has run out of ideas. And that's where MTG is. And I'm really glad to be one of the few that jumped out in 2020 and basically said, you know what, I'm de-risking myself from supporting this brand because all they're doing is they're milking the remaining zombies that are so bought in, so head in sand that they cannot, they can't see the forest from the trees. They can't see the evil that is being perpetuated by the true stakeholders of Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro. And not to get into like many minutes of anti-establishment rhetoric, but I've got my beliefs. I saw the writing on the wall, and despite that, let me just indicate to you and to the viewers how how detached from the current game of Magic the Gathering I am. I can confidently say I haven't spent one single penny buying WotC product or Hasbro product for the past 2+ years, but I am a not small stakeholder of the Hasbro stock because if you can't beat them, join them. So I've got
Yeah.
I've got no qualms. I've got no qualms about making money. I'm actually making money off of Magic the Gathering, but it isn't because I'm buying the boxes. It's the,
The
you know,
cards,
the
yeah.
yeah, the dumbasses that are buying the cards. They're the ones that make Hasbro stock move up. So every single dumbass that goes out there and spends money, sorry, you're fleecing yourself and you're giving your money to, Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast, ultimately BlackRock, and some of it goes to Rudy because he's publicly said he's a stakeholder, and some of it goes to me. So thank you for your dumbassery, MTG fans out there. I appreciate it. I appreciate it every single quarter. But let's not dwell on that. What is your story, Jamie, about you separating from Pokemon? Because your channel name has Pokey in it, so that's your origins, right? But it
Yeah,
sounds like now you're almost
yeah.
fully entrenched, if not 80%, or more, maybe close to even 100% of your content is on Fab. Why the transition for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think I've always been, I mean, I've been making YouTube content since YouTube started. It was very low quality stuff. It was me holding my phone up, propped up against, something, recording me opening some booster packs or, me showing off something. And I think Pokemon's definitely been, I still really love Pokemon, I think, but I've moved. I was traditionally collecting Japanese, and I think the way that the Japanese market's moved the last couple of years has almost kind of pushed me out of it. And I think at the same time, I suppose, I started getting into Flesh and Blood. So it was almost a natural transition for me. I still buy Pokemon products. I don't make very much content on it. And I know that what I enjoy doing is Flesh and Blood content. I
Okay.
add in different card games here and there. I try to add in little bits, some unboxings, or, I might do a video every couple of months talking about another card game. But I'd say 80%, maybe 90% of the content I make is Flesh and Blood. And I think that's definitely where I enjoy. Flesh and Blood is very different. The backdrop behind me, I've I never built a display to that size.
Yeah, it's a Fab shrine.
With it is a fab shrine. It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, the journey with Flesh and Blood has definitely been something that I've enjoyed, and it's been great that not only has it progressed. I mean, we saw what happened with Monarch. We saw a little bit of a dip. Some people describe it as the Fab Will Winter, but I think most card games honestly had that after the pandemic. People started going out more, and people weren't spending as much on card games. And I think that kind of slow rise now we had what, February to April was mad. I bought my alpha box. I think I just came back from Japan. I think it was the week I came back from Japan. I was like, I need to get this alpha box because I'd wanted it for so long, and I felt that, as a collector, somebody that has invested so much time and money into this game, not having an alpha box was something that kind of bugged me. So, I remember messaging you about it, and there was a couple of other people that I contacted to try and get it done. And, I managed to get it done. And I think a week
Oh, great.
after that was when we had these massive booms, and alpha boxes doubled. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad that I got that, because I probably wouldn't now be able to pay.
When was this again?
Dollars it went up to.
When was this again?
This was February this year.
This year.
This was this year, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. What great timing, because that's when the needle is really moving. January, February, March. Uh, Fab really just shot the heck right up, and it didn't stop until about Pro Tour. But we're in a little bit of a lull right now, and I think
Yeah.
that's expected. I think I've tracked not the individual cards, but I've tracked the market, and it usually cools down after every major. And our last major was, Pro Tour Baltimore. So it's great to hear
Yeah.
that you finally secured that box. I answer questions like this all the time, and I don't mind. I try to volunteer myself out as a resource because I'm involved on the Facebook community as well. I just want to be like an objective person with knowledge to help out individuals. So if I had any hand in guiding you to the right box, a nicely authenticated box, then I'm happy to do, happy to have helped, and I'm happy to do more. I will say though, Jamie, if you can get around to it or amass enough assets and enough of an appetite and enough resources to go for it, I would say the Grail sealed product is just a case. You got to get a case. You know the thing,
Yeah,
the
sure.
difference between a single box versus, the security of having a full sealed case, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that is, it's. I've got a couple of items on my list. I think, I managed to get the rainbow foil extended art Tiendal spring tunic. That was on the list as well. I managed to secure that. Next will probably be a cold foil gem, one of the first three for sure. Minor or rainbow foil for now, and then a case of alpha. I guess is for me, for anybody in flesh and blood. Really, that is the kind of the grail. But yeah, that's what makes it exciting. I think there's that kind of feeling with flesh and blood that getting those items, compared to some other card games, like Magic, that that these items aren't just going to drop. A case of alpha is not going to drop to 5K overnight.
Okay. Well, I don't it's it's not my place to fully tell you how to check off items on your list, but let me just tell you that from my experience on assisting individuals, even curating collections for individuals that have succeeded in amassing very impressive collections in Magic the Gathering, that since 2018, I've had this conversation probably 20 times. And when people ask me, oh, how should I go about collecting either an unlimited, beta, or alpha collection? Um, the question always comes up, oh, should I just start from the commons and then the uncommons and then the rares? And my very proactive and now it's trained answer is no, you go for the most expensive, hardest to find piece first. So in Magic the Gathering, the most expensive card is the Black Lotus, similar to base set Pokemon. The Charizard, right, number 4 of base set Charizard. You don't go for like the Squirtle, unevolved non-foil Squirtle. You go for the foil Charizard first, then the Blastoise, then the Venusaur, right? And then you get everything else. So it's great that you have these assets, but my friendly suggestion is if you have things like a loose box of alpha, you have something like the Rainbow Foil Tunic that is worth right now about 2 boxes of alpha, then you're already kind of 3/4 of the way there. You know what I mean, Jamie? Because the tunics are
Yeah,
rare. They're rare. I give you that. I would say the tunics right now are even more rare. Rainbow Foil tunics, I hear, and I agree with the numbers out there, based on what I see, are more rare than remaining cases of alpha. But the remaining cases of alpha are more tightly held, if that makes sense. I think there's something like
yeah,
250 to 300 rainbow tunics in the world. I think there are maybe 300 to 400 cases remaining of alpha in the world. But, there are people with multiple cases of alpha. I obviously admit to that. And you couldn't trade me a rainbow foil tunic or 2 rainbow foil tunics for a case of alpha because there's just a gap there, right? And alpha's alpha,
yeah, for
whereas a
sure.
rainbow foil tunic is a promo. So if you could get that last quarter of value and you have the opportunity or you could find the opportunity to trade up into a case of alpha, my advice is now, the next year, the next 5 years, it would be easier for you to go back 2 or 3 or 5 years from now and trade for a rainbow foil tunic than it would be for you to find a case of alpha. And not only that, you've got a little logistical issue. You're in Europe, or are you in
Yeah,
Great Britain?
yeah. I'm in England.
You're in
Yeah, UK.
England. Okay, so I was correct about the colonial aggression. Yes, if you're in England, I hear that it's even more difficult to source alpha or arc cases right now simply because of the lack of distribution. Like, I believe distribution goes that there's a source somewhere in like that England, maybe Germany area, one of the main European distributors, and then it gets redistributed up to
Yeah,
uh, Great Britain, England. That I forgot what that. I'm an American. I won't
United
speak for all
Kingdom.
of us,
Yeah.
but we're bad at geography. Is it is it still Great Britain? All that plus
Yeah,
Ireland and Northern Ireland, or I don't even know if there's a Northern Ireland
yeah.
anymore.
It's the UK. Yeah,
UK, yes, United
yeah,
Kingdom. That's what
yeah.
I was looking for. Grade school was, a lifetime ago. But yeah, EU, larger EU gets redistributed to the UK. I'm sure there's smaller distributors, but I think by the time Fab got to England, there wasn't a lot of alpha to go around
No,
either. And right now I'm hearing that dealers go to the US on majors like these multiple pro tours or nationals. They'll go to the US, they'll go and move, one or two cases at a time to Europe. And then usually some of the whales in the greater Europe area, they secure it and they even buy it for, let's just say that a case of alpha is like $20,000. They'll buy it for $25,000 or $30,000 without a second thought just because of the logistics. So I'm just giving you a practical,
yeah,
ears to the ground, a visual or, interpretation of how the market is moving. Whereas a rainbow foil tunic, you don't have to go through customs, you don't have to go through a flight, you don't, have to go through multiple middlemen, right? We can do a tunic deal, right?
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, or you can just go
yeah,
on
and I think
Facebook and find three
yeah,
to five of them at any given time, I would say. So, hey, sorry to dwell on that, but I think the takeaway here is you go from the largest item, check the most difficult item on the list, rather than go backwards. Like I had people in the past, not just let's start from the comments. Oh, let me get the dual lands for Alpha Magic the Gathering. Let me check those off the box. I'm like, stop! Don't go get the $5,000 to $10,000 items first. Go get that $100,000 item. No matter what, accumulate, work your way up to that. Check that off the box, and literally 40% of the set is in that one card. I don't know if it's the same with the base set and the
yeah,
unlimited sets and the shadowless set of Pokemon. Is that about how it works, where the Charizard is literally number one and takes up a
yeah.
large double digit percentage of the whole set value?
Yeah, the Charizard for sure is commands a much higher price. I mean, as you said before, you go for the Charizard, you go for the Blastoise, the Venusaur, then you'll probably go for like Mewtwo. I actually, in fact, Chansey's probably worth more because not because it's love, but because it's so hard to get a 10. Because normal Pokemon cards, the foiling is they get scratched so much, so the PSA 10 population of that is actually lower. But that's kind of a variable that is a little bit different, but I think for anybody watching as well, that's for sure a great take home that if you've got goals, wherever card game that you're collecting or any assets you're collecting, you know, work your way from the top and work your way down.
Yeah, so again, that's just a friendly suggestion. You do your journey how you do it, but given that extra input on logistical challenges and regional challenges, um, yeah, I'd be pretty confident to say half of the sealed product is left of the really good stuff in Flesh and Blood is probably in the United States, just by how big it
Sure.
was and how US was just adopted it early, and then the big blow up happened in the US because US literally bought from APAC. Like the Americans, some of my colleagues literally was buying out at the end of 2020 and the first 3 months of 2021, like first quarter 2021. They were literally buying out Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Australia and New Zealand, of course. So there's a lot of that action. A
Yeah.
lot of the assets got aggregated here.
Yeah. I think that's definitely, I mean, I had to get my alpha box from Australia because there was only one single box for sale in the UK. And obviously, he had commanded a very high premium on it because it was the only box in the UK. So I had to get it from Australia. Thankfully, I managed to sort that out and it came here intact. But it's definitely in the UK and Europe for sure is a lot harder to get these products, whether it's sealed product or it is just the high rarity stuff.
Yep.
Because I'd say that a large portion, as you said, of the high value items in Flesh and Blood are going to be concentrated to the US.
Absolutely. And the same thing goes for the gem. I would probably suggest you go for the heart as soon as possible. Shards, I'm not going to say they're a dime a dozen, but they're around, right? There are probably
Yeah,
three
I've
to
seen
five
them
x
all.
as many cold foil shards that you can access readily as there are hearts, and then the eyes would be second. So, yeah, it's great to hear that you have a list though. You've got a game plan. You've got a game plan.
Yeah. I think when I when the sort of pin dropped to me, when I realised that Flesh and Blood was a card game that I was going to be serious about, I did sort of start making a point of trying to pick up as many. At the start, it was just amassing the largest collection I could
Mm-hmm.
in the UK. So was just a case of that 2021 era where everything had dropped after Monarch and stuff. I was literally going door to door to card stores and saying, "Oh, do you have any Flesh and Blood?" And they'd be like, "Oh, we've got some product back, but we don't really sell it. It's not popular." And I would just offer them out basically to buy them out whatever they had, because for them at the time, they considered it dead stock. They wanted to stock the top three TCGs. That was what was going for them. Digimon at the time was really popular too. So that's essentially what my game plan was, really. I sort of moved. It was a transition of wealth from Pokemon. I sold some high value Pokemon items that had kind of amassed its value over the last couple of years, and then kind of moved that in to build my. I remember in 2020, I think it was, I sold two large cases of sealed Pokemon tins from the mid era, and I used that money to kickstart this Flesh and Blood collection,
Oh, very
which
nice.
I have now. So I think that's the story that I've spoken to a couple of people, and they have done similar with Magic. They had moved a lot of their wealth from Magic and transitioned it over to Flesh and Blood, um, to kind of capitalize on the prices that were there for Magic and for Pokemon at the time. And Flesh and Blood was, relatively cheap at the time because it's, still now growing. I think definitely prices have cooled off a little bit now, which makes sense. I think card games generally cool off in the summer as well, from my experience, which is obviously always a great time to be buying and a bad time to be selling. But yeah, for sure, I think if anyone's watching this, and most people will probably be interested in Flesh and Blood if they're watching this, to be honest. But I do have viewers that collect other card games.
Mm-hmm.
I'd highly recommend checking out Flesh and Blood. I think if you haven't heard me talk about it before, um, I'm willing to, I've given most of my bulk to card stores that I visited that were interested in adopting Flesh and Blood. I know that there's been some issues over the last couple of years with stores feeling that they haven't been supported in the UK by LSS, which is something that I've highlighted before on the channel. I think there seems to be there's quite a big sort of push at the moment with Japan is an opening market that's been growing recently. I know we're getting Japanese language next year. The roadmap, when that was announced, I think I don't know if you noticed as well, or you had in contact with people, but I had a lot of Japanese buyers buying stuff that I was selling. A lot of the old foils from the first couple of sets.
I don't sell Flesh and Blood, so I don't come into contact with any buyers. However, I can confirm that I lost a lot of deals to Japanese buyers, where it's like I'm thinking the market is in a certain meta right now, and it's like, oh well, you know what? The cold foil tunics that are listed for $5,000, I could talk it down a little bit. Maybe not 4,000, but I can get them for 4,250, for example, or 4,500 on a worst case. I'll lop off $500 to $750, get my 10-15% discount after it stagnates, and I could be in the middle of a discussion, just like, hey, is that tunic still around? And then it's like, oh no, it's sold. It got snapped up. What do you mean snapped up? And it's like, oh, full price. And I'm like, oh crap, because when I hear that things are moving en masse, full price, that's in my experience, that has to do with the Japanese culture. They feel, I think,
Yeah,
that it's disrespectful to negotiate. I mean, within reason. If it's an Alpha Black Lotus and it's 125,000, they want it for 115. They're like, oh, excuse me, sir, will you take 115 for the Alpha Black Lotus? Let me think about it, but sure, right? Like that interaction has happened. That
yeah,
literal interaction has happened with some Japanese buyers in the past when I was selling Magic. But yeah, when I hear that en masse, so many high value scarce Flesh and Blood items are moving, I was like, oh crap. They've really, they've really come in hot and heavy in full force. And I mentioned the tunic, but the specific card of Cold Foil Findel Spring Tunic was very, very aggressively purchased. I won't say a buyout, but there are these Japanese parties that just operate in their TCG shadows. They've got their own little circle. I wouldn't be surprised if there was like a Japanese cartel of some sort that was buying up these assets. And and I hear it's very aggressive, it's very insane, and it's almost like a become a point of pride for Japanese major TCG stores to have one or two hearts and one or two cold foil tunics in their stores just to display and say,
Yeah,
look, we've got the top card in the game. So it's a point of pride for me to be. I would say I'm an early adopter, at least in the US. Right after Rudy, there was probably Rudy opening up his Crucible, and I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm going to just go ham and purchase as much WTR Alpha as I can, and follow it up with a little bit of Arc and do some other collection buys at the time. And at that time, quarter four, November of 2020, people are like, oh, what are you doing? Don't you see how hot the Magic the Gathering market is right now? You're an idiot if you're putting your money into Flesh and Blood. And I'm like, no, don't you see how hot the Magic the Gathering market is right now? This is when you should be harvesting, reaping your rewards,
yeah,
liquidating as much of this, frothy product as you possibly can. I'm not perfect. I admitted, and I've said on my episodes that a lot of that froth went into crypto because I felt that crypto was correlated to Magic the Gathering since the MTG Ox days, and I looked at the trends. I was like, crypto is kind of like an intelligent diversification into some easier liquidity. But then we all saw what happened with the crypto market after 2021.
yeah,
On the flip side, a diversification into Flesh and Blood, and eventually a hard pivot for me, that was probably one of the most intelligent things I could have done in late 2020 and 2021.
yeah. I've sort of seen that a lot. I think a lot of people that collect card games in general are sort of, they kind of diversify themselves into different things. I know crypto is something that I briefly touched, and as most people did, they got burned. So I just
Yeah.
went, no, that's not my thing. I'll stick to card games where I can hold the card in my hands. So in terms of grading cards, obviously I've seen you speak about Beckett on the channel and PCG, and obviously we've got PSA as well. What is your preference still, BGS for Flesh and Blood, or is PCG like warming you a little bit?
Okay. Up until wow. I swear this is not scripted between Jamie and I, but the timing of that question is very, very interesting, and I have not disclosed this to anybody yet. So this might be not groundbreaking but disruptive to the market. Prior to this, or prior to this week, I stopped actively supporting PCG US because PCG, the headquarters of it is in New Zealand, and they've got some loyal affiliates in Australia, in Malaysia, and I think Australia and Malaysia, New Zealand. Yeah, Australia and Malaysia. But the problem child was always the US because the first adopter of the licensing of PCG was Channel Fireball. So you saw what Channel Fireball did with their agreements, dumping like what it was. It was dollar cost average, like $43 first edition boxes bundled with unlimited of Flesh and Blood.
Yeah,
Right before the Pro Tour, they dumped, Tales of Aria, and I would say their most egregious move was they lied to everybody about the scarcity of Monarch, and they manipulated the price of Monarch Monarch First Edition up to $600 a box. That caused that whole swelling. They were just taking advantage of people and lying to the whole greater TCG community, and then creating this huge bubble, huge wave, and then it all came crashing down. A lot of that was that exacerbation of that already hyperinflated market was Channel Fireball. So Channel Fireball screwed over the Fab community. They screwed over, even they did the nearly exact same thing with MetaZoo, and they lost distribution with MetaZoo.
yeah,
They were doing it with PCG US and exploiting their license within the United States. And out of my respect and my friendship with the founders of PCG headquarters, Matthew Rogers and Robert Miller, I just bit my tongue, and people kept asking me why I didn't, promote PCG anymore. And that's all bad. That's all bad news. That's all rain clouds and thunderstorms and whatnot. Like I'll even go further. For example, the leaks. Like I was at Flesh and Blood Worlds in November when Dynasty was pre-releasing. I think there was a pre-release at Worlds of Flesh and Blood Dynasty, and like, how is it when you're trusted to handle the pre-release and trusted with the sealed product of Dynasty of Legend Story Studios, and the first box opened was supposed to be the box that I opened with Chris Sires, right, on stream to spoil the product? Why do you have a PCG US graded Command and Conquer Fabled, right? They asked me, they're like, oh, this is Legend Story Studios approved. Here's the Fabled Command and Conquer. I'm like, wait, is this kosher? They're like, just get on camera, Saint. Shoot a 50-second spot for us for a PCG commercial. And I took them at face value, and later on I learned in the background that was not approved, and they opened boxes without authorization. Now, enough about that. I could go on for 2 hours talking about the scummy bullshit that the executive management of Channel Fireball, well, Card Shop Live, were pulling. But the reason why that I mentioned that the timing is important is as of this past weekend that just passed, it's July 4th. So as of like the end of the last 1 or 2 calendar days of June, the PCG partners in the headquarters has just bought back the rights to the licensing of PCG US.
Oh, okay.
So
That's cool.
I only defaulted to Beckett because I was between a rock and a hard place. I had helped PCG headquarters with their launch. I made a lot of videos about it. I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot. I'm not going to slap myself in the face while, the licensee Channel Fireball of PCG US is just, burning the reputation of that product and the company to the ground. But I am now wholeheartedly going to work with PCG headquarters to do our best to help guide them towards a new, better US presence. Let me say that. Jamie, did I lose you?
Okay. I think we lost for a bit, but we back?
Yeah, we're back. So yeah, basically, just these last 5 days, this past calendar week, PCG basically bought back the rights to the United States. They're going to rebuild everything and do it the right way. For example, one thing that PCG US was doing was they were just still issuing paper slabs, whereas the rest of the world, all the affiliate offices.
I think we've gone again.
Crap. This is not ideal. Can you hear me? Hello, hello. Now you're sideways, buddy. Can you hear me? You're moving. You're good. I can hear you. You're a little light, but I can hear you.
Yeah, I can't hear you, though.
You cannot hear me? Testing, 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 testing. Technical difficulties. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
You were the right volume and then you went down, and you're jumping around a lot. Is it a connectivity issue?
Yeah, I think it's... Are we back?
We've been back. You've never left other than being a little choppy. Can you hear me?
think we might have to restart the call. I can hear you, yeah. It's quite quiet though.
You can hear me, but it's quite quiet.
Not sure. Yeah. I think might be. Try talking again.
Hello? Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, that's perfect.
Are we back on?
That's perfect. I don't know what happened. Yeah, we are. I can edit out that. That's fine, no problem.
Okay. So, yeah,
Bits
absolutely.
that jumped.
So, exactly what I was saying was that the headquarters of PCG, they purchased back the licensing rights. So, I mean, thank God, finally, after all this time, I can come out and just say the license rights are back in the right hands. The good guys have it again. They're going to make it right. One of the things that PCG US didn't do right, other than, doing things like opening boxes and grading their own cards early, one of the things they didn't do right that the headquarters was doing and every other office was, you've seen the sexy metal labels of PCG, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, Jamie, have you ever asked, like, why is it that the US, like people grading in America, still have paper labels, right?
Actually, I'd never seen a metal label done from the America.
Yeah,
It's
because
been a re-
yeah, they were even on recent batches from these past 3 months, because they literally went off the reservation and they didn't comply with the standards of the headquarters, and the headquarters and every other satellite office was making metal labels. Meanwhile, PCG US, they were issuing their own paper labels to save money and to basically extort the US customer base for an additional 8, or I think it was some number between $8 and $15 on top of grading per slab to get the metal label
Wow.
option.
Yeah.
Like, that is some crooked stuff. Imagine, like, you're a McDonald's franchises and, the headquarters of McDonald's is using actual grade A quality beef, and every other location is doing that. But there's one location, one region where they're using rat meat in their hamburgers. That's basically what the Card Shop Live folks were doing with PCG US, and I'm just so glad that that's over, and it's going to be a reset button, and they're going to start from scratch. So there you go. That's going to be on your channel. That's not anywhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good news. I think, I've got one PCG slab. I mean, I'd spoken to Matt actually about a month or two ago, and he had mentioned they were opening up, I believe, in Germany for grading at some
Yes,
point.
they are.
So I'm very excited. I'm hoping that I'll be able to, start grading with PCG. Obviously, I've got one PCG slab, and the rest of it is BGS slabs. So I've got a couple of PSA, but I'm not a fan of PSA with Flesh and Blood. I think, the not having the subgrades bothers me.
Well, just the fact that the cards shake around all the
And they
time,
shake
and
around.
they can get damaged in the case, and there's like all sorts of gunk, and even just the friction, paper against plastic or cold foil against plastic, it creates this like smudging within the case of PSA. And if anything, I haven't even talked about this anywhere else yet, but CGC is eliminating subgrades and moving towards the direction of PSA. And they went from a really ugly blue stamp paper label to an even uglier label. And I'm just like, you know what? When incompetent, money grab grifter people, grifter companies are doing, making mistakes, you don't want to interrupt them. It's like, good job, CGC. If anything, just eliminate the possibility of getting any future Weiss graded slabs, future, MTG graded slabs, and they were definitely not making any inroads in Flesh and Blood, but now they're just done. They went from a 0.01% market share to just flatline 0 in those 3 TCGs. And it's like, good luck going from differentiating yourself in Pokemon to like being non-competitive in Pokemon, right?
Yeah, that's it. I think, it's a conversation I've had with a lot of people. I know some people that were big fans of grading with them. I think I own one card of theirs, one graded CGC card. I've never been a fan myself. But yeah, it definitely means, I think that's great news for PCG with obviously what they're planning now.
Yeah.
I think the European market is sorely lacking. We've got grading companies here in the UK, and there are some in Europe. I know Cardmarket, which is the equivalent of TCG Player. They grade stuff, but
Oh
it's
my,
not
the
great.
card market, really? Really?
Yeah,
Come on, man. Come on, man.
Yeah, their Cardmarket, they're absolutely the worst label I've ever seen in my life. So I'm very excited to see PCG in Europe. It's I've done videos on it before. I actually had the Malaysia branch reach out to me, and offer to let me grade, because I tried to submit it to the US,
Mm-hmm.
and I contacted them and they said no, you can't do that.
Okay.
You need to send it to someone that lives in the US, and they weren't willing to sort of take the hit on international shipping. But the Malaysia branch actually offered me quite recently. But then I had spoken to Matt and he had mentioned it's coming to Europe, so I thought I'll try and visit it in person if possible. Germany's only a 2-hour flight from me, so
Yes, it definitely is in process. That actually started in Pro Tour Lille. I had introduced the German contact, the LGS contact, to, I believe it was only Matt there, but we had talked in Pro Tour Lille, and despite the little disruption, the uncomfortable experience that I had getting bed bugs and whatnot, I still conducted a lot of business, made a lot of connections, continued to network, and then that deal for PCG Europe was, I think, solidified in Worlds in San Jose, and now it is definitely happening. I can't give you're right about Germany. I believe that's where the facility will be, but what I can say and what is out there, and I want to remind everybody, is that the Fab Slab is going to be featured in Worlds. As long as I hear it's in France, as long as France is still standing by the time November rolls around, right?
Yeah, it might not. But
and then the locals don't burn it to the ground, right? Then rough times, really, really interesting times we're living in, man.
Yeah, but for sure, that Fab Slab is definitely something that a lot of people are very interested in. I know, you've probably seen it before. I've seen a lot of players that are kind of anti-grading.
Mm-hmm.
With Flesh and Blood, I think the fact that you can have your hero and your equipment graded and still play, that was something that blew my mind when I saw people playing Flesh and Blood and they had graded cards.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just, I explained that to so many people that collected and played Pokemon and Magic and other card games, and they were very impressed. And this Fab Slab's definitely gonna kind of help that transition as well for people that do have graded cards.
I always said that in the format of Commander, it would be a great idea to grade your commanders, because you probably want to put a counter on it. I hear, at least, last I remembered, when your commander dies, like your commander's your leader, it's an avatar of you, the wizard, right? Your commander's like some awesome legendary hero or legendary creature, or a dragon, right? And if it dies, you put one counter on it, it costs like more mana, more resources to bring back from the dead. And if it dies again, then it costs even more resources to bring back. So you need to put a counter on your commander. How better to indicate your commander, because they already do that. Magic, like Wizards of the Coast, already has commander products where the commander's like this big, right? Yeah. It's a different size card because I believe it functions outside of a 99 card deck or 100. I forgot if it's the commander plus 100 cards or the commander 99 cards. It's one of the two, but the commander is separate from that deck that you shuffle because it's its own hero. It's its own play space. You could totally grade commander cards and grade your commanders so that they can be protected and preserved.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and the way that grading's moving more into, the amount of people that grade cards now, how much graded cards have in, in the collector space of card games now it's always growing. I think, I owned like maybe 3 graded cards before 2018, 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of, started preserving the cards that I had in my collection. And, now I sort of have, monthly sort of submissions now.
That's great. That's great.
But I think, for sure, it's definitely something that Flesh and Blood excels at. Again, another reason why it's just unique. Not that I need to sort of say any more reasons as to why, but it's another reason. I think PCG opened up in Europe for sure. I know so many people that are excited about it, and taken back from that channel fireball card shop live, you know, the bad guys, the villains in the story, if there is villains and heroes.
No, they definitely are villains. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, you know, everybody that's in any card game really, I think now knows what Channel Fireball and Card Shop Live are like. But that's great news to hear that you know, PCG have taken back that from them, because, you know, they haven't any position inside Flesh and Blood, and I know, you know, because Matt Rogers is, you know, how much he's gone with Flesh and Blood before, and, you know, how much he does now. You know, having almost nothing left in Flesh and Blood is great to the game.
Yep. Hey, you had mentioned about grading. Grading's actually come into the forefront. Sure, if you look at it compared to 10 years ago, sure, grading's much bigger. But if you look at grading from like 2 or 3 years ago, I would say grading's actually probably declined in volume by 90%. Because in 2020, when graded cards were all the rage and graded sports cards were all the rage, and, you know, these valuations for any asset, because there was just free money all over the place, you need to stuff the money somewhere. You know, any asset was probably 200 to 1,000% higher than it needed to be. Grading was huge. As a result, within these past 2 years post that 2021 bubble burst, grading's probably reduced in volume by 90%. And I commend you, and I commend any viewer out there that's still grading, because the true reason for grading is to preserve the cards that you appreciate, the assets that you love, so that they don't deteriorate in condition, right? So they're preserved just as is, at least with, you know, PCG and with BGS they are. PCG and CGC, you know, they move in the case, so that's not ideal. They're deteriorating while they're, you know, creating friction in the case. But you're preserving the assets that you care about, and then hopefully when the sentiment comes back, that's when the asset prices and the valuations and the premiums go up. Right now, it's like after a tsunami, everybody's devastated because, you know, although the grading volume has dropped by about 90% in some cases, in some cards, the card value has also dropped by presumably anywhere from 50 to 90% in some of the TCGs, right? So if you're there holding the assets and still grading and still appreciating the assets after a, you know, having or after losing 80 or 90% of your values on some of these assets, that means you're really into it. You're genuinely into it. I actually didn't like it, and that's why I was heading for the exits and liquidating as much MTG as I could in 2020, late 2020, early 2021, because I just saw all these pretenders that even if they were the right age, or even if they knew about Magic, well, first, there were people that didn't know anything about Magic the Gathering, and they were just coming in. There are people that had no business in Flesh and Blood, never played a game of Flesh and Blood, and they're just coming in like, oh, look, I'm going to buy a Heart of Findal. Oh, don't you know? Haven't you heard? These things are $50,000 now. It's like, why? Because you said so? Where was the verified transaction? I transacted 5 in the past 30 days. Other than you buying it for, call it 20 or 30,000, and telling people that it should sell for 50 because you heard it happened out back behind some dumpster. Like, where's the actual data? Like, these characters were coming in to the graded asset market, and I'm like, I don't really want these people to be in here, you know? Like, back in 17, 18, Magic was just down from the highs of crypto hitting an all-time high at the time of like 21,000. Then it dropped in late 17, early 18. Magic dropped with it. That's when I entered into the real hardcore graded community of MTG. And that's when I looked around. It's like, who are the actual players in this ecosystem right now? They're the people that love MTG. They're the people that believe that these assets hold value. You know, they're the diehards that weren't here, that just got in 16 and early 17, right? And I think right now, you look around, you got to look around, Jamie. Right now, you see who's actually dug in to the special scarce assets, the beautiful assets and high quality assets of Flesh and Blood, preserving them, grading them, appreciating them. And those are the people that, if they and their passion stands the test of time. Because I think the standing the test of time for Flesh and Blood as a game, I think that's in the rear view. Anybody still saying this game is a pump and dump, anybody still saying nobody plays this game, either they're content creators that are joking, or they're just fucking retarded. Because 4 years and the growth and the market share that we've taken away from other TCGs, and the activity and the sales volume worldwide and the regions that Flesh and Blood is enjoying, this is a real deal. Now, if you and your appreciation of collecting and your appreciation of graded assets, if that's real and true, you will want to appreciate those assets when they're down 50% or 80% or even 90% from their highs. Like I would say Cheyenne right now, as an example, is probably down 90% from her, or at its worst was down even more than 90%. Do you remember the days around Monarch when Cheyenne graded 9.5 was like $10,000 or $15,000 US dollars, right?
Cheyenne
Was ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
And that, I mean, just this past quarter, just 3 months ago, you could find Cheyenne's for $700 or $800 US dollars. Some of the nicer graded ones for $1,000 or $1,200. So that's a data point right there. She was a very significant card, but because she hasn't been playable and because of the whole decline, the cratering of prices, she's down 90%, right? But is she any less beautiful, in 2023 than she was when she came out in 2020?
Yeah.
She's not. She's still gorgeous, right? Yeah. She's still a gorgeous piece. She's still scarce. Presumably there's only 1,000 or slightly less than 1,000 copies of Cheyenne in existence in the world. So it would be good to get, a highly graded Cheyenne. Speaking of, do you have one?
I don't know.
You don't?
I only have rainbow foil copies. Again, it's on the list.
Okay. Well, maybe it's a little further down, but at the same time, I mean, if you look at it the right way, they're 90% off right now, right?
Yeah. I think that's the thing. That's something that I've mentioned on the channel before, and I've mentioned to people I knew, sort of buying and collecting the Flesh and Blood I have in the last couple of years. For me, if you're doing something that is, we take it back to maybe 3 years, it was a very young card game. It's very inexperienced. The volatility of the market was very up and down. When you're collecting something and you truly have a passion for it, if Flesh and Blood, for whatever reason, there's a video announcement tomorrow and LSS went, you know what, we're done now. We're finished. And everyone decided, it was crashed. I would still love every item that I have because, it's beautiful. The reason why I bought them was because I enjoy Flesh and Blood, the lore, the art, the gameplay. Like, there's so many factors. And, if it went to zero, it'd be a mad weekend. I could not.
Well, don't worry about that. Before that even came close to happening, I'd give at least 5 hedge funds a phone call. And I'd personally draw out a line of capital to save Legend Story Studios if I had to, if it ever came to that. But we're nowhere close. I would say the game's probably healthier now than it's ever been. And I hear they're expanding. I'm hearing about some some murmurs of a new headquarters, and right. So it's expansion. It's all growth in the right areas. It's growth in the right direction. Growth in the art, right? The recent art of all these cards, the angels, even the non-foil extended arts, like showing all the heralds. I mean, oh my god, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And Levia, I mean, I don't like Brute. I don't particularly like Levia, but shout out to the artist. I think was it Steve Argyle, Levia Redeemed?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's finally a sexy gal. She was never very sexy, Levia, right?
Yeah. I played, I remember Levia was the first hero I played when I went down it was Blitz at the time. I was only playing Blitz, and that Blood Debt was trying to understand that very early on. But that was my first. So I recently picked up a cold foil copy, just because it was something that I wanted, and this set, the artwork, the amount of people that because I recently set up an online store and I was selling pre-orders for Dusk Till Dawn. The amount of non-Flesh and Blood collectors that were asking me about it, they'd seen the artwork that I was posting on my stories and Instagram, and they were so intrigued by it.
Yeah.
Something that I hadn't seen them, the last couple of years when Outsiders came out, Dynasty, with Uprising, which I thought were all fantastic sets. I love Dragons, so Uprising was great.
Yep.
But that wasn't the same feeling. This set, for me, this set feels like, it's the 10th expansion. The amount of change that we've got in this, I think this set is what is really going to start steamrolling for people that haven't entered Flesh and Blood yet, that maybe were on the fence a little bit. I think this set is going to be what cements them in whether or not they're going to join over the next 12 months. It feels like a very important set, and I think they seem to have smashed it out the park so far. So
Oh yeah.
I'm excited.
And we're 2 weeks before full release. We're a couple of weekdays away from pre-release. And I also want to take this moment. I don't want to celebrate a victory or do I told you so or anything like that, but just mark my words, Jamie and anybody else that eventually watches this video. It's July 2023. In the coming months, the world will learn how actually scarce 125,000 boxes are. Because when that print run came out, heard a lot of people bitching and moaning, saying that, oh my god, it's printed to oblivion, it's printed to the ground. Nobody cares about Pokemon printing out millions of boxes. I would estimate that Pokemon probably prints 10 billion cards. I'm not even exaggerating. Probably 10 billion cards a year, right? Like more Pokemon cards get printed than there are people on this planet. And Pokemon is still in demand. This is 125,000 boxes of Monarch First Edition. And people's heads exploded because they just don't understand what scarcity is really about. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And they're presumably, with 125,000 boxes, it's 3,000, call it 3,100, between 3,000 and 3,300 great libraries of Solana cold foil. That is not a lot of cold foils. That is not a lot of fableds. That is as many beta Black Lotuses that exist in the world, right? So there's many cold foil libraries of Solana as there are beta Black Lotuses, and people are complaining, right?
Yeah, I think something that people, when I said to them about this, something they couldn't quite grasp is scalability. 125,000 people when maybe 50,000 people are collecting a player. That's a lot. But as the game grows, these print runs, that's it. That's all there is of that. As the game grows, more people entering it. Suddenly 125,000 boxes when 500,000 people are playing and collecting or investing, that's not a lot. And as you said, the game's grown, and these sets in the past that people said, it was, Monarch was printed to the ground, it was too many of them, the demand isn't there. People are going to wish that they could pick up Monarch Unlimited in the next couple of years, because this is the second of the 3 Monarch sets that we've got going on. It'll be interested to see what happens going forward, but Monarch Unlimited for sure, which is a set that $45-$50 I've seen boxes go for.
Yep, they're hurting right now. They're hurting.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, well, I guess that's a great way to end this on. And thank you very much for coming on the channel. I really appreciate it. If you haven't checked out the socials, check out Fable Hunters on YouTube. There'll be a link in the description below.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you all for watching. Please comment, like, and subscribe as always, and have a great day.
Yeah, appreciate it. Hope you liked it. This is a great experience for me. If you want to, run it back one day in the future, let me know how the video does, and we'll be in touch. Awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Bye for now, viewers.
Have a great day.
I stopped